Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how Rishi Sunak and the Tories in general have been making a grievous error in their pursuit of culture wars at the expense of issues that are actually important to voters. The Conservatives are facing a situation in this election which is unique in the experience of any Conservative MP, candidate, or even staffer. They are having their votes squeezed from both sides very effectively. They don't know what to do, and in their panic, what they've done is make things worse. And there are three main culture wars which the Conservatives have been pushing. In London, they're pushing ULEZ. Now, latest polling suggests only about 6% of Londoners consider ULEZ to be a voting issue, and for all we know, some of those think it's something to vote for rather than against. Nationally, the Conservatives are pushing asylum and immigration, most notably through the Rwanda plan, but also other destructive policies as well. And related to that, this nature of withdrawing from the European Convention on Human Rights. Now, these immigration and human rights themed culture wars are not simply a strategic error. There are Tory MPs who have been actively pushing for the abolition of human rights for a very long time. Attacking the EU and immigration were just stepping stones towards getting the public to devalue their own human rights. Get people thinking, oh, we need to get rid of them. It won't hurt you. Don't you worry. You'll be fine. Oh, no, we're doing it to hurt these other people that we are saying are your enemy. But your enemy is not a doctor from Portugal or a nurse from Ghana or an asylum seeker from Afghanistan. Those who cause you harm are more likely to be the billionaires in Belgravia, one of the richest and most opulent parts of the country, where Nigel Farage enjoyed a swanky birthday party yesterday. Proper man of the people stuff. But not all Conservatives are sold on the benefits of abolishing human rights. So those Conservative MPs who've gone along with this, Rishi Sunak included, have done so in the belief it is strategic. Yet I would say the evidence points the other way. Last year, when he was still deputy chair of the party, Lee Anderson said that the election should be fought on trans issues and culture wars. Actually said that as explicitly as that. And now where are the Tories? Anderson has become Reform UK's first MP, and the Tories are still pursuing his strategy. But let's look at how these culture wars have actually gone. In 2021, start of 2021, COVID was dying down as a main news story. Small boat crossings in the Channel started to feature. Instead of dealing with the issue properly, the Conservatives doubled down on what was causing the problem, closing off safe routes for asylum, reducing the number of staff processing claims. Now that led to not only noticeable levels of channel crossings, because you've closed off the safe routes, so the unsafe routes become busier, but difficulty in finding accommodation for the increasing backlog of asylum seekers. It made the issue of asylum newsworthy, and Reform UK jumped right onto it. At the time, Reform UK were polling at 3%. And about 31% of Conservative voters thought asylum and immigration was a top issue, so fewer than a third of them. Asylum and immigration became a more important issue for Conservative voters over the course of 2021 as a result of this focus. It rose to about 51% of Tory voters thinking it was a top issue. Then, over the first few months of 2022, it dropped in importance. At the same time, Reform UK's share of the vote was polling up to about 5%, but then dropped down to 3% in the first few months of 2022 as asylum and immigration become a less serious issue. Now, Partygate may have distracted some attention from asylum and immigration, but the top issues tracker shows that actually there was a sudden spike in interest in the economy. This was likely related to Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine and the subsequent increase in fuel and energy costs. People felt the impact of a sudden squeeze on their living standards, and so real issues took precedence over confected ones, as is always the case. The Conservatives had the opportunity to realise that actually they're only helping Reform UK here, dial down the talk on asylum and immigration, deal with it properly, let the issue go away. Instead, they blew it wide open. In April 2022, Boris Johnson and Priti Patel announced their Rwanda asylum plan. Now, Johnson will have been keen to push this because his leadership was under threat and he needed to shore up support from the far right. But it had a calamitous effect on the Conservative Party's electability. Asylum and immigration had dropped as a top issue to just 40% of Conservative voters. Now it was climbing. It eventually hit a peak of 65%. Think of Conservative voters, that is, thinking it's a top issue, and is still thought of as such by 63% right now. In the same time, Reform UK's vote share in the polls, which had dropped back down to 3% just before the Rwanda plan was announced, increased to 7% by the end of 2022. Now, at the end of 2022, of course, Rishi Sunak was now leading the Conservative Party. He could have chosen to bin the Rwanda plan as too costly and sink the money instead into pragmatic solutions in the same way he pursued pragmatic solutions for several Brexit problems. But he clearly didn't see the need for pragmatism on asylum in the same way he did for trade with the EU. So first of all, he made stop the boats his priority in the January of 2023. Then later on in the year, the High Court, and then last autumn, the Supreme Court ruled against the Rwanda plan. At that point, at the point at which the Supreme Court ruled definitively against the Rwanda plan, Reform UK had risen over the course of last year from 7% in the polls to 9%. Not a huge increase over that roughly 1 year period, but still a bit worrying. But since the Supreme Court judgment, and with Sunak doubling down on using the Rwanda plan to define his entire premiership, Reform UK have risen from 9% in the polls to 16%. The fortunes of Reform UK map very closely with the misfortunes of asylum issues for the Conservatives. They created this monster by closing off safe routes, slowing down the processing of claims. Had they continued with a normal approach to asylum, then yes, there'll always be those in the media who will complain, oh, asylum seekers. But they would struggle to get a handle on anything to make a major issue of for ordinary people, particularly in a cost of living crisis. You know, we wouldn't have to be scratching around paying a fortune for extra accommodation because the existing accommodation would have been fine. We wouldn't be creating friction with the court system. We wouldn't have small boat channel crossings. Reform UK would have continued as a rebel without a cause and would probably have had to fall back on purely Brexit failures to whine about. The Conservatives created this monster because unsuitable leaders, first Boris Johnson and then Rishi Sunak, were so weak that they had to agree a sort of Faustian pact with the far right, but the monster they created is now eating them. And now Rishi Sunak is once again playing Reform UK's culture war games on their terms. He's hinting again that he would pull us out of the European Convention on Human Rights if he thinks it's stopping him dealing with asylum as he would like. Now, again, let us remember, it was not the European Court of Human Rights who ruled against the Rwanda plan, although, of course, they would also deem it illegal. It was the UK Supreme Court, which sits a short walk away from Parliament in London. But anyway, in reality, we're not leaving the convention, or more specifically, Ireland would need to reunify before it's even legally possible. I wonder if the DUP ever give any thoughts to the fact that the plan for their far-right colleagues in the Conservative Party cannot actually succeed whilst Northern Ireland is in the UK. This is because the Good Friday Agreement is built on a scaffolding of the European Convention on Human Rights. There are other consequences for leaving, of course, but this would be most definitely the most immediate legal issue. But Sunak doesn't really want to do this. He's just dangling the possibility again to keep the swivel-eyed loons on side. But just as with the Rwanda plan, it's a terrible strategy for the Tories. Because voters who are horrified at the prospect of tearing our constitutional framework down are more likely to either vote Labour or the Lib Dems, say, where once they would have voted Conservative, or at the very least, if they won't do that, stay home on polling day because they cannot support this idea. And for those voters who are conned into thinking that removing human rights won't remove their human rights, they just see Sunak as toying with the idea of dropping them unconvincingly. It's clear he's no supporter of this policy. He's just going along with it in the most non-committal way imaginable. So those voters will be drawn to Reform UK because they are clearly more committed to it. Basically, Sunak has positioned the Tories into being too crazy for sensible voters and too weak for crazy voters. And so this problem the Conservatives have right now of being squeezed on both sides, like for most of my life, the Conservatives had free rein on the right. So they fought in the centre for votes. They were very efficient at that. In 2015, UKIP did challenge the vote on the right. This was fairly new for the Conservatives. And again, they panicked and made the wrong move. But there was no real competition in the centre at that particular point. 2015, Lib Dem vote collapsed and Labour was still going, oh, we don't know what to do. Now the Conservatives find they have lost a lot of votes from both the centre and the far right. Labour and the Lib Dems are presenting the strongest challenge that either have for a very long time. And now the Tories have an effective party on their right flank as well, all at the same time. The Tories have made this situation worse. They're failing to talk about, much less doing anything about, the policies which the bulk of voters want them to do something about around the centre, which means they're losing more votes to the centre by basically doing nothing. The only policies they want to talk about are those which appeal to those on the authoritarian right. Only, by their own standards, they're failing to deliver. It's a lose-lose situation, and it's remarkable that what used to be a ruthlessly focused political party has walked into such an obvious and painful trap. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.